mixture will never boil completely dry, but the copper sulfate will precipitate out right about now. Here is the fine copper sulfate powder in the sulfuric acid. Just filter it off and recycle the acid to make more copper sulfate. If you want very large crystals, just let the mixture evaporate instead of boiling it, and eventually you'll get these nice large crystals of copper sulfate. We'll be using copper sulfate in upcoming videos.
Assalamualaikum and hello everyone. So basically I think that we all know about this kind of compound which is CuSO4. But did you know that CuSO4 is being used in medicine? But anyway, let's get into what is actually mean by CuSO4. So CuSO4 is actually an inorganic salt which has the formula of CuSO4H2OX, which X is in the range of 0 until 5. The most common salt that we can find for CuSO4 is actually the pentahydrate, which X is equal to 5. CuSO4 molecule consists of an ionic bond between copper cation and sulfate anion. When the copper to sulfate is in the hydrated form, it will form a crystal blue light color, and while in the anhydrous form, it will form light grey powder. For the characteristic, it is actually highly soluble in water, and in the biological role, it can be a synthesizer which it can bring side effect if it was exposed to people or animal, where it can develop allergic reaction in normal tissue after repeatedly exposed to the compound. For the application, it can also be a fertilizer that can assist the growth of the plant. In manufacturing, to produce copper to sulfate, it will be extracted from the copper ores or non-ferrous scrap. After the extraction, the copper will be dissolved in dilute sulfuric acid with the presence of air. Then it will produce a saturated liquor. To obtain copper to sulfate crystal, it will be allowed to cool down slowly in the large container with lead strip to provide a surface for the crystal to grow on. If only the powder is required, the cooling process will be faster. Actually, copper to sulfate crystal can also be found in the laboratory using the process of crystallization. I have said before that this copper to sulfate can be used in medicine, right? So Aina, what do you think? What is the uses or benefit of copper to sulfate in medicine?
For the question, well, there are a lot of benefits or uses of copper to sulfate in medicine for human, plants, and also animals. So the first one, copper to sulfate is used in order to help with public health and safety. It destroys algae and bacteria caused by growing algae in the swimming pool to preventing athletes' food. This is done by mixing copper to sulfate with fluorine mixtures of showers, locker rooms, and swimming pools to prevent the bacteria from being able to live on the fluorine indefinitely. Do you know that copper to sulfate is also used to test blood for anemia? The blood can be tested by dropping it into a solution of copper to sulfate of non-specific gravity. If the blood sinks, then it means that the person is healthy and do not have anemia. The largest health benefit of copper to sulfate is that it is used to control the growth of fungus and bacteria on fruits, vegetables, and other crops. This includes mildew, which causes leaf spot and plant spoilage. So copper to sulfate will bind to the protein of this fungus, damaging the cells and causing them to die. Algae blooms occurring in lakes and reservoirs disrupt the natural balance, degrade water quality, and can be dangerous for consumption. Copper to sulfate has long been used to control algae and other aquatic weeds. It kills algae by binding to it, damages the cell, causing them to leak and die. As for animal, lime and copper to sulfate powders are used frequently on open wounds in horses. They have value in treating wounds with excessive granulation tissue. So I have already discussed the uses or benefits of copper to sulfate in medicine. But copper to sulfate also has its side effect, which will be further discussed by our next presenter, Alia.
Thank you, Aina. Since Aina has briefly explained to us about the benefits of copper sulfate in terms of health, I'm going to share with you the side effects that might occur if we use it improperly. Copper sulfate, on the other hand, is not a trace element that exists naturally in plants and animals and might cause irritation when exposed to it. Aisha has mentioned earlier that when copper sulfate acts as a sanitizer, it can develop allergic reaction to us. Copper is likely safe when taken by mouth in amounts no greater than 10 mg daily. Copper is possibly unsafe when taken by mouth in large amounts. Adults should not consume more than 10 mg of copper per day. Kidney failure and death can occur with as little as 1 gram of copper to sulfate. Symptoms of copper overdose include nausea, vomiting, bloody diarrhea, fever, stomach pain, low blood pressure, anemia, and heart problems. Not only that, it may create a burning or a stinging sensation if absorbed through the skin or eyes. If this is introduced to the eyes, it can cause itching, eczema, conjunctivitis, inflammation, and cornea irritation. It is only mildly toxic as it most often vomited up quickly due to the extreme irritation that causes on the gastrointestinal tract, which is also called as alimentary canal, pathway by which food enters the body and solid wastes are expelled. If someone consumes copper to sulfate and does not vomit, they could be at risk of copper to sulfate poisoning. Regardless of whether the vomiting occurs or not, anyone who swallows copper to sulfate should visit the ER to rule out poisoning and ensure that no damage to the brain, liver, kidneys, or stomach lining has occurred. Copper to sulfate exposure can result in death in some cases if it left untreated. For those with constant exposure to copper to sulfate using it for agriculture, there may be an increased risk of liver disease, though this is more likely in someone who has a pre-existing condition called Wilson's disease. I will leave the further information about Wilson's disease to Alice.
Thank you, Alia. Just so you know, researchers found it takes 13 to 33 days for half of a large copper dose to be eliminated from body. Overall, precautions step are: first, make regular medical checkup. Identify early if you have any special condition that needs to be careful about the amount of copper uptake. Second, get copper sulfate medicine from trusted agent only. For example, hospital and pharmacy. This is because other sources may sell fake medicine. It can be wrong dose or no dose of medicine at all, so it is very unsafe. They are usually packaged to look like the real thing. Lastly, take copper sulfate exactly prescribed by the doctor. Follow the directions of the label carefully. The condition being treated is usually determined by other medical conditions, our age, height, gender, and also weight. It is important to be aware of appropriate usage of copper sulfate medicine. Some people need to be extra careful, for instance, pregnancy and breastfeeding. Higher amounts than this can be dangerous. In one study, mice were fed very large amounts of copper sulfate before and during pregnancy. Some baby mice died during gestation or didn't develop normally. Thus, copper sulfate should only be used if clearly needed. For children, they shouldn't get more than tolerable upper limit or UL of copper. Higher intake can cause liver damage and other harm. Children may be especially sensitive to pesticides compared to adults. This is because their brain, nervous system, and organs are still developing after their birth. Hemodialysis people seem to be at risk for copper deficiency due to blood retained in the dialysis machine and tubes, so they are prone to get anemia. Thus, they need copper supplements. The prescription dosage of supplements may vary depending on the patient's condition, so it's important to consult their doctors. For Wilson's disease, the liver is unable to get rid of excess copper. So if they take more copper supplements, this will only make things worse as the copper will build up in organs such as brains and eyes. So for women, the effects are infertility and also higher rate of miscarriage. Meanwhile, men's testes won't function properly. So I think that's all from us. Thank you.